What's up, everybody? We are back. John Delarose here, delarose.com, DELARROZ.com. I am a comic creator and a cultural commentator. If you guys have tuned in for the first time, welcome here. And I have my books up on Amazon. I've got a Patreon. I've got a newsletter to subscribe to. You can get a free graphic novel by doing so. I've been very influenced by Mr. Ditko's work over the course of my career, and I've been trying to push towards a better understanding of comics, better understanding of storytelling through heroism, through diving into what is good and what is evil, based on his philosophies and based on what he presented, as well as a lot of other influences that are a lot of fun from the golden and silver ages of comics. I hope you'll go check those out. Those links are in the description below, and thank you everybody who supports the channel by doing so. All right, this is a little late in the day on the Steve Ditko talk here, as there's been a big hullabaloo about a legal filing which has been done by the Ditko estate in order to try to claim ownership of the Spider-Man and Doctor Strange properties from Marvel. I'll get into exactly what that is in a second. You might have already seen a couple things on it, but I come from a unique perspective as a Ditko fan, as a person who's followed and studied his objectivist work, to kind of why this hasn't happened in the past and why a lawsuit really didn't go forward prior to this compared to what has gone now. If you look at Steve Ditko's work, he actually really radically changed in the late 60s, early 70s to do something that really nobody else did. He ventured out from a very successful spot at Marvel and then a very successful spot at DC also, and Charlton, to a place where he actually created his own comics. He was doing independent work, doing the type of stories he wanted to do with no editorial telling him no. He wanted to present his philosophy, which was based on an objectivist sort of outlook, and really present what he thought were supposed to be heroes in the strictest sense possible towards the people who would read. It was a very interesting sort of life that he led, and he really pushed his own life towards something that you might have seen in like Howard Roark in The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. If you remember that book, or if you have not heard of it, he was an architect who really just wanted to be known for his work. He wanted to put the best work out there. He didn't want to be known for any sort of celebrity. He didn't want people to know his personality. And in that book, it caused problems for the architect, and in Steve Ditko's life, it definitely caused problems for him as well among the sort of social circles out there. But in their estimation, the work is what's important for a man, and the work is really what should stand the test of time and what should be seen. It's a very noble and very interesting outlook on life, and it's very difficult to sort of lead that life. It's almost like a ascetic monk style life, but for a I'd say more of a worldly sort of outlook on things. It's very interesting and different. So you see the cartoon here. This is a Mr. A drawing by Steve Ditko, and you see that he actually writes out letters about really dialing in what the hero is supposed to do. He's supposed to be rational. He's supposed to be honest. He's supposed to work with logic and truth and justice. He's supposed to care about consent. A big part of heroism versus villainy is the fact that villains always try to force their way onto you. You see the villains panel in part 2 here, where Mr. A actually lets the villain fall to his doom, because why would he even expend any energy on a villain? You see, it's got irrationality, corruption, injustice, etc. And that is the philosophy which drove Mr. Ditko. Mr. Ditko had a is a philosophy. So good was good, evil was evil, there's no in between. And as such, if you compromise with evil, if you even lower yourself even 10% of the way, say you're 90% getting what you believe is good, you've muddied it to the point where it is only evil, according to his philosophy. Now, he lived this. He really stubbornly lived this, for good or for bad, in his life. I happen to admire the man and everything he did. I don't know that I'd want to live this way, because I don't have to get too far into that. But he really lived a life where he was working his tail off in his apartment, kind of as a recluse, and just doing his work over and over and over again and putting it out there. He really refused any sort of marketing. If you look at the last 30 years of his life, he had a friend from the comic industry, Robin Snyder, go out and publish his work. And Robin was an editor from DC. Robin did a lot of great work in his own right. But they did so without really marketing things. If you look at their Kickstarters that they put out in the last years of Steve Ditko's life, they actually put them out there. They just give you the title. They say, this is Steve Ditko. It's 48 pages. Buy it. And their philosophy was actually, we're going to surprise you with what's inside. You don't have a right to know. You don't have a preview of what's inside. You just got to understand that we do good work and that you will continue to buy it. Well, that's a really interesting philosophical way to run things. But on the other front, it's very difficult from a marketing perspective, especially when you're trying to cut through with social media and all these other things and all these other giant brands out there to get any attention. It was very disheartening for me to watch the ones toward the end of Steve Ditko's life get like 130, 150 backers on Kickstarter. This is the man who really created such interesting and beautiful works. And he's still continuing to do so up until his death. That's about a quarter of what I'm getting, and it makes me sad because Steve Ditko is a much better talent than me, by far, for sure. I will definitely go and give the master that. All right, so this actually influenced the way that he handled the properties of Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. He finishes his work, he lets it go out into the world, and he does his thing. In his estimation, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange were, quote, old work for hire, work that he did for companies. And so he just did the work and put it out there, and then once he was done with Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and moved on to something else, he thought, well, I'm not interested in this. This is old work. You can go view the work if you're interested in that. I have nothing to say about it. I have nothing to add to it. I'm not interested in revisiting the work. I'm interested in doing my new characters like Mr. A, and we can just go forward with that. He refused interviews, even about Mr. A or all of that. You couldn't get an interview with Steve Ditko. You couldn't talk to him about it. He wouldn't give you a magazine article talk about it. He did in the 1960s very early on, and I actually have a few copies of those early interviews, which are very interesting. But he completely refused them after, I think it was 67 or 68 was the last one that he actually really gave to anybody in terms of comic fans. A very interesting thing. He really wanted the work to just speak for itself. He wanted what's done to be done. So later in his life, he actually came out with a series of essays, and a lot of those were published in this book here called The Avenging World. And I see there's one used on Amazon for $44.45. I don't own this. Is not the one, my copy. I do have this, but he has several essays in here which go off on Stan Lee, what is creation, who actually had the creation, and who was due that. And there's some interesting essays in here. His sort of outlook on things is that he is due a creator's credit on Spider-Man especially, and that Stan Lee overstated a lot of his input in a lot of this stuff, and therefore Stan Lee is lying, and therefore Stan Lee is evil. It's like I said, he has a very rigid outlook on things of that matter, and he lived it. So he lived that total degree of no compromise. There was a point where when the Spider-Man movies were coming out, it was debated whether Steve Ditko should get the co-creator status or not, or just creator status or not. And he got really mad just about the phrasing of things. Stan Lee went out and said, I have always considered Steve Ditko to be the co-creator of Spider-Man. Well, I think that was a statement that was meant to say, look, I'm sorry I took too much credit in the past. Let's try to mend things. Ditko actually overanalyzed those words, I think, and because Stan Lee said, I have always considered, he didn't just say, Steve Ditko is the creator of Spider-Man. He actually parsed that to say that, that could mean that other people could consider it differently, and therefore it's not a definitive statement. And he wrote essays about that also. Now, I don't necessarily agree that it should have gone that far. I think it's kind of mincing words where Stan Lee's intent seemed to be to mend fences there. But he did refuse to compromise on anything on that level because in his estimation, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. Steve Ditko is the co-creator of Spider-Man and was owed that. Now, it was put into the movies, and that was in the credits of the movies. And from what I hear, Steve Ditko actually received checks, royalty checks, based on that. And he refused those checks because of the fact that he wanted things to be said a certain way. And he thought that accepting those checks was a compromise because maybe he would get some money from it. But on the other hand, he would then be like sullying himself for not being pure in truth and could not do so. Very interesting outlook, let's say the least. So that's why Steve Ditko really never went and tried to do lawfare on any of this stuff or any of that. He found those sorts of things to be below him. He found it kind of beneath his time. Like he wanted the work to speak for itself. He really didn't care about the fame, the credit, the things like that. It was more important to him to keep the work going and to not spend any of his time or resources on that sort of thing. Now, Jack Kirby and his estate went about things a little differently. They sued for different rights to different things. Most notably in the 80s, they were trying to get their actual original artwork pages back from Marvel. And Marvel actually only gave them about a third of their original artwork after a long, long legal battle of that. And it burned bridges with Jack Kirby and the Marvel Company. So there's a lot of bad blood here that goes back a long way and a lot of lore in the comic industry and here in general, depending on these rights. Well, now Steve Ditko's been gone a couple of years. The rights have gone to his brother and then to his nephews, who are now suing Disney over whether Steve Ditko should have, and their estate should have ownership over Doctor Strange and Marvel. There was a copyright law that was enacted in 1976, which allows some retroactive work on this to be done. Jerry Spiegel, the creator of Superman, and his estate actually did a lawsuit based on this to get some rights to some of the money that was coming in from the Superman credits. And so they might have a legal leg to stand on here, which might be pretty interesting and might be useful for this estate here. And yes, with Ditko himself, he would have probably never been able to go into this because legal is a lot of give and take, back and forth, taking deals, things like that. And that's a process that he would find distasteful and he would just not be able to do just based on his own objectivist morality. However, there is the fact that he created this, and there is the fact that he really was the person who was the onus of these characters. And so in a sort of moral sense, I would say that there is more due to this estate. There is more due to these heirs of Ditko. And though he wouldn't have liked the legal process, these folk may be in a better position to actually do what was proper here and actually get justice for Ditko, and by proxy, perhaps justice for Kirby as well. So we'll see how it goes. I'll be monitoring this, of course. I'm very, very interested in this. Gosh, I would love to see with these guys ending up with characters like Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. Hey, I talked to them a little bit, so maybe they'll let me write it. Okay, it's self-serving, but what can you do? I'm very interested in this. I think at the end of the day, Disney will probably offer a very generous settlement, and I think it would be tough not to take it when you get an offer like that. So we'll see how it goes. That's just my estimation. I'm not a legal expert or anything like that. I'm just a Ditko fan, and I hope my perspective gave you a little insight towards the man, the art, and what's going on with this legal battle today. Hit that like and subscribe button. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will be back soon.